Homes, and I'm on the ARM Board of Directors and co-field captain with Kyle from Cardinal. And we would like to welcome you, and if you need a restroom, there's a restroom right outside the doors, so that's, if you need water, we have water right out there. We'd like to thank our co-sponsors. Our co-sponsors are the ARC, Southeastern Minnesota, and the ARC of Minnesota. ARM, the Best Life Alliance, Cardinal of Minnesota, the Consortium for Citizens with Disabilities, Hiawatha Homes, MAMES, the Midwest Association for Medical Equipment Services, the Wing House, and Bear Creek Services. We'd also like to thank the Zumbro Lutheran Church for hosting us this evening. So for our agenda tonight, Sarah Grafstrom from ARM, she's our Director of Advocacy and Community Relations. She'll be facilitating the forum tonight. So she'll be introducing the candidates and having them introduce themselves. Each candidate will be responding to a question, and then if we have time, as time allows, the audience can have questions that we'll take with cards. So if you need a card, you raise your hand. Someone will give you a card, and then we'll gather those cards and hopefully be able to answer your questions if we have time. We've also tried to have some time at the end so you can mingle with your candidate from your district. So, Sarah, thank you for facilitating tonight.
Thank you, and I'm going to make my comments very brief because I've never ever had this many candidates at a forum. When Cindy and Kyle and I talked about what districts to invite, we said, well, what do we invite 25 and 26? What if all the candidates show up? Gosh, you know, but we're going to, it's a great problem to have. We are so happy that all of you have made time during your busy election season to be here, and we're going to be really close and get to know each other really well. So, like I said, I'm Sarah Grafstrom. I am the Director of Advocacy with ARM, which is the statewide trade association for providers who provide mainly residential services to people with disabilities. I'm going to give all of the candidates a chance to introduce themselves. A couple things though, ARM, along with many of our co-hosting organizations, are a 501c3 nonprofit, so I just want to remind our candidates that we are a nonpartisan organization, so please direct your comments to the questions at hand and not at any opposing candidates. And then Kyle over there is our timekeeper, and he's going to be really important to us tonight to make sure that we give everyone adequate time to answer the questions. And then, like Cindy said, we will have time at the end for all of the candidates to mingle and talk to their constituents. So without further ado, I'm going to let you all introduce yourselves. We'll start with Senator Nelson, and then as we go through the questions, we will just alternate going down the line, but we'll start with Senator Nelson.
Well, good evening. I'm Carla Nelson, your state senator in this area. So welcome to the district that I'm so honored to represent. I serve on Health, Human Services, and Housing Committee. That would be a committee that's important to you, I believe. I also serve on Taxes, Higher Education, Jobs, Ag, Rural Development, and Capital Investment, so a full line. My background is in education. I'm a special educator, a master's in education, and I'm also a reading specialist, master's in teacher leadership. But you know, I just want you to know my real background and my heart is actually my mother. She was a special education teacher as well, and when I was in what we called junior high back then, I did not like what I saw on the playground and how my fellow classmates were treating some of her students. And so that really made an impact on me, and instead of going to recess then at that time, I started working with her students during that time to help them with their literacy skills. My first job was with the ARC of Polk County, Iowa. And then, I should say before that, when I was in high school, I got a scholarship from the ARC of Warren County, Iowa, that helped me with my college bills as I went into education. So I just thank you for your leadership and greatly appreciate the strong supports that we have in this community, and you can count on me to continue to stand for you.
Thank you. Mr. Wright?
Can you guys see me? Is it easier if I stand up?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think, can you hear me okay in the back then?
Yeah.
So I'm Rich Wright. I was born and raised here, went to Lourdes, graduated in '87. I went to St. Olaf College, and when my wife and I, well then she was my fiance, well girlfriend, soon to be wife. When we were at St. Olaf, we actually worked at Camp Edenwood up in the Twin Cities, which many of you probably know is a camp for families with children with severe disabilities. And that was a life-changing experience. Personally, I think everyone should do that because first off, it gives families breaks, because let's be honest, it's a hard road to hoe, right, when you're working with someone who needs so much. But also, you learn so much as an individual by working with people with disabilities. And I learned a lot about myself, my wife learned a lot about herself, and I think that's part of why my wife went into medicine, so she could help people. And I ended up going into law so I could help people, and I've helped people of all different persuasions, and I've helped people with disabilities. And right now, part of the reason I'm running is because it's part of my community service, I believe, and it's a natural extension of the community service I do. I do a lot of work with legal assistance of Olmsted County, which helps a lot of people in need. Many people in lower economic strata, and that includes people with disabilities. And that work is important, and that's why I do it. But I'd like to take the skills that I have up to the state capitol so I can help all of us do better. One of the great challenges I see before us is, as this DMC build-out comes, are we making sure development takes into consideration the needs of people with disabilities, curbs, and how do we get into buildings, doorways, are doorways adequately designed? And that's something we can have a great impact on in the future. And certainly afterwards I'll stay around, so if anyone has questions, you can just grab me, okay? Thanks.
Mr. Austinson.
I'll stand up too. Please don't let the shine off my head. I'm John Wayne Austinson. Like Rich, I was born and raised here in Rochester. I am 1 year older than he is. I graduated in 1986 from John Marshall High School. Been basically born, living here all my life in Olmsted County. I did take a couple years and go over to Mankato, the Harvard of the Midwest. I'm sure some people have heard that before, but it started back when I was in junior high school. My father was a guidance counselor at Rochester John Marshall for 30 years, and I had a neighbor, Bobby Herzog, who had Down syndrome, and we had a swimming pool in our backyard, and I learned how to give swimming lessons at an early age. And when I was at John Adams Middle School, 7th, 8th, 9th grade, we were on a mod schedule. And I would take one of my mod open periods and go give swimming lessons to the disabilities, and that's where it kind of started, because I saw how, I'd have Bobby over, and we would work with, him there, and I just took part of my time just to start out in junior high school and move from there, and I've always been involved with that. I've been a teacher now for over 25 years, the last 21 years in Byron. Was a head football coach for 19, and a total of 25 years total. I did some here in Rochester as well. So needless to say, kids and disabilities, I've had them in class, I've seen them, and it's very important to me to make sure that they have the right opportunities to succeed. We're all going to face them in our life. This isn't just a certain issue. We're all going to get old. We're all going to have mental issues. We're all going to face different kind of issues, and it shouldn't be partisan. It should be, this is something that we're all going to face, hopefully if we live long enough. And I just want to make sure that as I'm running for House Seat 26B, and that's basically South and East Olmsted County. And I want to make sure when I get up there, I want to, I'll be fighting for you. Thank you. Perfect. I thought I was smoking the lights out with my shine.
Representative Pierson.
Good evening. My name is Nels Pierson. I'm the state representative currently in House District 26B. Appreciate you guys hosting forums like this. This is a great opportunity, obviously, to interchange on specific issues, and I love the fact that you're all very active in seeing many familiar faces from your visits in St. Paul and in the community here as well. So I appreciate all that you do. It's been wonderful in my first 2 years getting a very good education on a lot of the issues that you're dealing with. I would say that I tried to champion all the legislation that I could for your interests in my first 2 years, and look forward to doing that moving forward if I'm fortunate enough to be reelected. I am a realtor. It's my full-time job here in Rochester. I'm honored that our community does a lot to help out folks with disabilities. We could always do more, and I think that that's something we need to focus on. I was honored to author a bill for the Zumbro Valley Mental Health and get some of their funding extended so that those programs could be wrapped around and used providing more services for folks, and I do just appreciate your guys taking the time of teaching us what we need to know to advocate for you. So thank you, and I'll save some of my time for maybe a question later.
Representative Liebling.
Yeah, good evening. I'm Tina Liebling, State Representative, and this is my district, and I'm happy to be here tonight. I'm going to try to not talk too long, because boy, if we all do this, we're going to be sitting here well into the night. But I do a lot of my work on health and human services. I've been doing that for a while. I've seen what happened in the last session with health and human services. You know, people who get home and community-based services, the caregivers need a raise. They need a raise. They didn't get a raise. There was a lot of lip service given to it. And the problem is health and human services, we know oftentimes what the needs are, but it's very, very expensive. So you can't be for the spending and also want to cut all the taxes and give everything back and not have the money in the state to pay for the services. And I am always somebody who's not only willing to do what's necessary to give people the services that Minnesotans really care about and really want people to have. But if we're going to be able to do that now and into the future, we have to be willing to raise the funds to do that. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Wade.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Will Wagner, candidate for House District 26A. I was born here in Rochester, grew up in southern Minnesota. I completed my bachelor's degree at Gustavus Adolphus College in St. Peter. I came back and really want to get involved with the area. That's why I decided to run. I thought I could really put in a lot of hard work and effort for this community that it needs. What really matters to me and matters to all of you, my youngest brother Danny is a low-functioning autistic. He means the world to me. You know, I've seen the work that all of your great organizations do and how they impact these people's lives, our families' lives, my little brother's life. And I know what you guys need. I know the funding needs to be there. The jobs need to be reinforced. We need incentive for these people to stay, to keep their jobs. It's one of the biggest problems in this industry. So focusing on that and really being there to back these organizations for the wonderful work they do. That's what I'd help all of us as a community in this instance.
Senator Senjem.
Excuse me. Good evening. My name's Dave Senjem. I am currently in the Senate. Have been since 2003. Been through many positions: minority leader, majority leader. I serve on taxes, transportation, and capital bonding, as well as the Legislative Energy Commission, and even such trivial things as the Capital Art Committee and now the Capital Reopening Committee. And we can kind of giggle about that, but I'm thinking about our last meeting and the emphasis that we placed as a committee on the reopening of the Capitol, that particular committee, and making sure that as we think about what we're going to do, that we certainly are inviting and welcoming and offering amenities, if you will, for the disabled community. So we can't forget that as we have a big picnic on the lawn. There are people that maybe are challenged in terms of moving around, and we need to take care of those. So I think what I'm saying is it permeates every part of our life. And I remember Andrew, who grew up next door. I would never call him disabled. I would call him abled, because Andrew is abled, and I think all of us are abled in many sort of ways. And there's no limits. We all know people that have certainly gone above and beyond what maybe some of us would even expect, and maybe surprised us and stepped up. My wife happened to work at Hiawatha Children's Home for 23 years, brought back lots of stories that I think we've absorbed into our family and sort of got to know this thing a whole lot better. But let me just offer this. As Nels pointed out, your faces are generally familiar. Lots of you come to the Capitol. A couple of people are always at the Capitol, though, and that's Steve Larson, my good former JC friend in Rochester, and certainly Kurt Retzen, who's Kurt's just everywhere in the Capitol. Everybody knows him, and what a voice you have in Kurt. So it's good to be here tonight. Look forward to the questions, and certainly make sure you vote on November 8th.
And we practiced, but I know I'm still gonna mess it up, Mr. Sock. Sorry. I know we tried it.
I've had a name all my life. And nobody has ever said it correctly. So, do not feel bad. It apparently is much more difficult than it looks. I was just sitting here and I'm moved by the stories that everybody has, that there's the connections, and we all have had connections in terms of the disabled or the otherwise challenged parts of life, particularly that some people have a larger challenge than I may have had. I happen to have come from a family, as it turns out, and myself, where I've not had anybody in our family. And so I won't create some sign of a story. But I don't think that that means I don't understand. And I don't think that that means that I'm unable to have empathy for the things that are needed. One of the things that I'm very aware of right now is the area of general social services and the employees that do that in our state. You're one of the groups, interest groups, but there are other interest groups, and all of them have a similar employee base and are having the same challenge. As a number, I think even in the piece it said this is a national problem. In fact, one of the questions is going to say that. So this is a very large problem, and I think one of the things it's going to take a very specific and yet strong kind of mood where we are going to move toward affecting career choices and affirming what kids may have been misled. Oftentimes right now, and I'm right on my number here, but the kids are told, go to STEM, go to these technical spaces. And I don't think all kids feel that way. And so I think that we also have to leave the social world, the social realization as being a place where they move into, which will create people that will do the work that we're talking about.
Thank you. Mr. Bradley.
Well, good evening, and thank you for this full room of a lot of familiar faces and really good people. First and foremost, I am Fran Bradley, and I'm looking to serve again the northern part of Rochester. But remember, the title is state representative, and I never forget that. I've had the honor of serving before for a dozen years, and then 10 years ago, retired, didn't have an intention to come back, because I tell people who ask me all the time why. The simple answer is because I'm answering the call to service, as people in this room have answered the call to service. My most important vocation right now is grandpa, and we have a 20-month-old granddaughter who tests that all the time and is just a delight. But her brother, her 16-year-old brother, who celebrated his birthday yesterday, as a matter of fact, has autism. And so that's a connection for us. I learned a lot from my brother Bob. My brother Bob passed away a few years ago, and I had the experience, I was only about 6 or 7 years old, of visiting Faribault. Faribault was where he went. At that time, that was the state of the art. And isn't it great that the state of the art has progressed so very much? And so when you're knocking on doors, you never know, but the door is going to open, and it's going to be a group home. And it's going to be good people there. I wrote a column not long ago called Very Special People, and it's about people with special needs who are very special, and Dave's right. We need to focus on what people can do, not just what they can't do. And that special people extends to caregivers that are represented in this room, and it also extends to families. Families, well, like my daughter and her husband, who have a son with muscular dystrophy who's 19 years old, and the kind of caring that they have to have. There is so much heart and so much love that the label very special people, I think, is almost not enough. But thank you all for being very special people.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here this evening. I'm Linda Walbrush, candidate, Minnesota House 25A. I think probably you'd like to know that I'm a teacher, and as a teacher, making a difference is important to me. I started out my career as a first grade teacher, and then I spent some time teaching 5th grade and 3rd grade and 2nd grade, and then I came around full circle and went back to teaching 1st grade. And it was then that I realized that I really needed to go back to school, and so I got my degree as a reading specialist to be able to work with children that had learning disabilities. And, you know, as we were talking about connections, I think we all have those connections. My connection would be that of being with my mom, who suffered from Parkinson's and dementia, and helping her and my dad navigate those very difficult times. So, yeah, wanting to make that difference. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, Representative Quam.
Good evening. It's a little smaller room than what we've had a few years in the past. We had an auditorium at another church just down the road. But it's good to see you. My background, I grew up here, graduated out of Byron, and moved back. My graduate work is in physics, so I've been more of an engineer, scientist, looking at solutions to problems. There was traumatic brain injury. Some of the patients and some of the people had issues with Workforce Center and other areas, so we had some meetings with some of your lobbyist groups involved here to try and have them realize that there have been great developments. I mean, the tools and technology that have helped haven't found their way quite into the Workforce Center and some of the areas to be implemented. And I think what we need to do is keep reassessing. What are the solutions? What are the options? Because it's an individual person. You have different needs. And so if we can come up with options, then you pick what will work for you. And I think that's more empowering than thinking one size will fit all. So I'm going to sit down and let the questions begin.
Thank you. And so for those on that end of the room, so you don't have to go last every time, for the first question, we're going to start right smack dab in the middle with Mr. Wagner and go this way and swing back around. And the second question, we'll start on that end with Representative Quam, just so you have an idea of how we're going to go. So our first question, our industry is facing a workforce crisis. There are simply not enough people to provide the direct care needed for children and adults with disabilities to lead independent lives. Moreover, high turnover and employee retention struggles have amplified the crisis. ARM's most recent workforce survey showed an overall turnover rate of 44% and a startling 57% turnover rate for those in their job for less than 1 year. How will you make addressing the workforce crisis and disability services a top priority at the legislature if elected or re-elected? And we're going to start with you, Mr. Wagner.
Are we going to use the microphone or just talk down? Well, for many healthcare industries, as most of you know, workforce is in great shortage. Being at a recent college graduate level, I know that there are hundreds of thousands of students studying biology, chemistry, psychology, all of these fields that are necessary to go into healthcare in the service industries that all of the organizations here need and that all the other healthcare organizations need. I think that the way that we can reinforce the attraction to working and serving in this type of industry is backed by education credits or like tax credits on student loans. We need some sort of incentive to give these people another reason to serve. Working with all of the wonderful people that are a part of these organizations, that's reward enough, honestly. As I've served, I've worked with Special Olympics here and there. There's plenty that can go on, but it's needing to attract more people to work in these jobs, and that can be done with education credits and tax relief.
Thank you, Representative Liebling.
So this is, of course, a huge challenge for the state and not just in this area. We know that right here in Rochester, we hear that there is a real workforce shortage across a lot of areas. But this is one of particular shortage. As the question says, you have this tremendous turnover with all that brings, the extra expense, the disruption for the clients, all of those things. For sure, we need to raise the rates. I mean, even if it wasn't for the turnover, a person who is working hard full-time at a challenging career, like working with people with disabilities, should not live in poverty. Should not live in poverty. And as I said in my opening, I know that Minnesotans value that we are a state that does very well for people with disabilities. And I say that advisedly because I know that it doesn't always feel that way. I know that there's always so much more that we need and so much more that we could do. But when we look at other states, Minnesota is really doing a lot better than a lot of other places. And that's because we're willing to pay for those services. But what happened in the last session is there was a lot of lip service given to raising those rates. We have to raise them on a regular basis, otherwise we fall behind. Inflation catches up. So for sure, it's expensive, but we have to raise the rates and make sure that the caregivers can make a living wage. Aside from that, there are some things we could try to do with loan forgiveness. We need to, in general, I think, make sure that our state is forward-looking and is an attractive place for young people to want to live and stay. And that means all kinds of other things that are beyond the scope today, like good transportation and a good quality of life, a good, clean environment, and all of those things that help people want to stay in Minnesota. But for sure, raising the rates is top of the list.
Representative Pierson.
Yeah, I'm actually going to keep my remarks kind of brief on this because, Representative Liebling is certainly correct in raising the rate. Mr. Wagner also addresses a similar point that she brought up, where we have education credits or the opportunities to have loan forgiveness for folks that are going into career paths that work with the communities that we're talking about here tonight. We also need to strengthen and incentivize getting people back into the workforce. We have a challenge of people, not participating in the workforce. We need to bring people back. We have a huge shortage, and in our specific community, that's amplified by the fact that in so many of the facilities that I've toured here in Rochester. A lot of times some of your top employees are often hired by another rather large employer here in the state of Minnesota. And so, I mean, that's something for us when the rates are lower than what, and again, minimum wage is something to talk about, but in Rochester, are we really talking about minimum wage anymore? Because, you can go into what are traditional minimum wage jobs, and folks you can get hired for $10, $12, $14 an hour in a lot of capacities, and so it's just a real challenge to keep good quality people and have those incentives there. But I think incentivizing bringing people back into the workforce is something that our state needs to focus on also.
Thank you, Mr. Owens.
Well, I agree with a lot of what's been said. As being in education, we're seeing this with teachers too, and we're seeing it in the labor force and in your community-based programs here too. We have to pay them more. We have to raise the rates more. We have to incentivize, and get people to, look at these career paths. I know that I believe when I heard that the University of South Dakota had 6 people graduate from their education program about a year ago. And I'm just like, they're not getting into these fields. We got to find a way to incentivize them. The more people you have in the field, the more workers you have, there's more of a team, there's less of a burden. And you're not working so many hours, and you feel you have to put in more overtime. So raising the rates, raising the pay, getting finding ways for college credits, internship programs, things that we can get in and get these people into these fields, because these are great fields. And there's a lot of great opportunity for people in it, but we got to find a way to wake them up to it and give them that opportunity to commit to it.
Thanks. So the #1 issue we face in Olmsted County over the next 20 years is a worker shortage. We will be short 20,000 workers according to the county estimates, and that's across the board. So this issue of not having workers available to do home health care, to work with people with special needs, is going to be amplified even more, and because of the pay issue, right? So what we have to do is, you've heard it already, raise the rates up, But we also need to start looking beyond that, because they have to be competitive wages. We all know, I've done this, the work is very rewarding, but that doesn't put bread on the table. People who are working hard deserve to live a middle-class lifestyle. And the only way we're going to raise those rates is what Tina alluded to in her opening statement. We need legislatures that are courageous enough to make sure we have the revenue to pay for the rates increases. Because if we cut the taxes, we don't have the revenues. And we can talk about raising the rates and giving loan forgiveness, but we simply won't have the funds to make that happen. And in our state, and growing up here, with the values that we have here, we value this type of work. We value people who work for people in needs. So I have no doubt Minnesotans will step up to the plate and raise the revenue to ensure that people can make a decent living and to make sure that our brothers and sisters are being served. I have no doubt about that. But we just have to make sure that at the legislature we have people that can make it happen.
Thank you, Senator Nelson.
I think the question was about workforce shortage, which, as all have said up and down the line here, is a reality that's only going to continue to grow. So the problem has been adequately defined. What we really need to look at is what are some solutions? What can we do? Some solutions have been brought forth, which is, of course, increasing the rates, because that would be the rates of reimbursement from the state. Yes, that's necessary. We also need to look at the workers and how can we better train the workers so we have the workforce that we needed. One thing is we should be looking at dual enrollment. High school kids who are getting high school credit and college credit in the healthcare fields. We have CTEC here that is focused in that area. That's very helpful. Yesterday I was at Bear Creek Long-Term Care Facility. Do you know what? They are offering a free CNA class right there at their facility because they are so desperate to train those CNAs. We need to, as a society and as a community, we really need to embrace this. So I think dual enrollment is part of that. I was glad to sponsor the Pipeline Project, which works with apprenticeships, mentorships with high school students, preparing them for actual apprenticeships in the job. And so I think that can be helpful as well, because there's a healthcare component to the Pipeline project as well. In addition, one of the other things that I found is, I was out door knocking this last couple of weeks. A gentleman who is quadriplegic in a wheelchair, living at home, told me a story that I'll just try and share with you in a couple of minutes. But we sat down for about a half hour and visited about this. Basically, he hires personal care attendants, and he does that hiring himself. However, it is taking weeks and months for the people that he finds in this tight job market to get through the Department of Human Services licensing. And it's just red tape, bureaucracy. And he is going without the people that he needs. Even though he's found them, they're willing to work for him at the wages that he's paying them or that there's reimbursement rate. And yet because of red tape in the system, it's taking months to get them through. I cannot understand that. That's one thing we do need to look at, is cutting through the red tape, making sure that we can get the people through the legal bureaucratic process in a quicker manner. I think that will help greatly too.
Thank you. Representative Quam?
Well, a lot of the normal stuff's been hit. I would expand a little bit on the partnership. I think there should be internships and lab credit given to students that are in training to work and learn in facilities. I think we're also losing a lot of time and staff time with regulations. I know some of the facilities, every time you go to a new house or a new patient, you're retraining on some basic compatible things. I'm all for having that individualized, specialized, but you're burning so much time in the training that you'd have an extra body to actually help the clients. So I think what we need to do is bring in people from greater Minnesota, different environments together, and have a broader group come up with the rulemaking and some of the regulatory to have a common sense, because not everybody is in a situation you might be in a large facility at, up in the metro. They've got, we've got a lot of smaller facilities here and there. And then lastly, I think we need something set in there so that the time you spend in, and it gets a little bit to the training, but there should be, after you have so many years, an automatic increase in what is kicked in the rates. Because if you don't have to have that churn, it can help the people that have been there for many years, their skill and experience that, you know, is worth that extra money. And I think we got to be smarter and do it different.
Thank you. You know, I've heard a lot of workable solutions tonight that I agree with. And to focus on the workforce crisis, I think, again, we need to have an equitable living wage for our caregivers. And that also means that, you know, they need to be able to have a benefit package so that they can have their health care as well, and so that we can provide affordable housing for them. I agree with Duane that partnership is so important, like with CTEC, and providing loan forgiveness for those people who are interested in choosing that as their career.
I think the question was something about how do you address it and how do you make it a top priority. First of all, from some personal experience, and Molly's here and Cindy's here, I happen to be chairman of the personnel committee at Hiawatha Homes. And I can't tell you how many techniques and creativity and all the things that we have tried. So I don't have to worry about making it. I've already been there trying to do it. In addition to that, even in my legislative career, there's a reason why ARC Minnesota named me Legislator of the Year a couple of times, and ARM named me, because I was fighting for. Let me point out to you, certainly rates are important. As a matter of fact, I think that most of the provider groups are even going beyond the rates and even risking, and I know we are at Hiawatha Homes actually going into operating deficit in order to be able to give people increases. But don't think that it's simple at the legislature. All you need to do is just tax a little more. If there's more money on the table, there's got a lot of competition. And I've been there and fought this fight. I've had to walk out of negotiation meetings to kind of cool things down a bit, to have people reminded of a priority. Because if there's another $1 billion available, there are all kinds of interests that will be there instantly to grab it. So what you need, I think, in this industry is people who can effectively fight to make it one of the high priorities, so that it has a chance to stand there and do it. I think we need to look at certainly some non-traditional things. We just, in Hiawatha Homes, moved to hiring 17-year-olds. That's a new move for us to open the door. There's an opportunity, I think, to look for non-traditional workforces. I think one of the other big things that hasn't been talked about really is turnover. And part of the reason for turnover may be pay, but another part of it is regulation. If you're getting regulated to the point where it's destroying your morale, where you're being forced to focus on things that you don't think add quality, we're losing people in many cases. It may have good intentions, but Rule 240 something D, okay, whatever it is, yeah, I think has ingredients in it that are demoralizing to our people, and we don't need to lose people for that kind of reasons as well. So we have to work across the board creatively.
Being last, I want to, everything that's been said is part of the solution. Some of them are more part of the solution, particularly as it would bring more people into the pool to be employed. One of the challenges that we have, and this is just again part of the conflicts that we have to overcome, is that the worst number here, the 57% for people that were in their first or second year of employment, however that was stated, that's a cultural change also. If you go to any occupation, people that are in their first 2 to 5 years are essentially churning at that time also. It's a part of the culture of starting out. So the number would be different if it was people of a different generation, but that's where it is. People that are being trained are also just less inclined to stay for a lifetime, or less inclined to stay for a long time. One of the things that I think could assist in that particular area would be to create variety and job portability across other services that you might be able to do with your training. I think that creates then a license and a change in your head so that you stay connected and involved. But this is an extraordinarily difficult thing that the society is going to go through. And I think that all of these are the solutions. I think that one of the things will be that we have to generate in the legislature, the people sitting there, to focus toward solutions. Right now, as Fran alluded to, that too often the dollars and cents is focused on, which appears to be easily fixed, but it's actually the one that is the most hard fought. I agree that the difficulty is if you can identify the money at the legislature, somebody wants that money. And they're gonna come with their biggest guns and also be a toe-to-toe for that. So it's not only about getting the money allocated, but it's also about creating the commitment of the people to it. So that's, I think, part of it. Employment is a huge challenge.
Has all been said that could be said, I'm not sure, but let me just say this, yes, it's certainly about rates, there's no question about it. We're certainly in a competitive atmosphere with respect to employments in Rochester, and the fact, we all know this, that many people working in group homes and so on are sought, or at least find their way to a larger home about 3 blocks south of here, and that north of here, I'm sorry, and that's the way it is, and so it's money, and we should not forget that we went into the last session with $900 million surplus. Now, some of us wanted to spend some of that on transportation, but for goodness sakes, there's still $100 million left there to spend, and we could have fixed this problem. It's a matter of will, and there wasn't, frankly, enough will. And it's too bad we're even talking about this tonight. We'll always talk about rates because there's always going to be a need to be rate adjusting. There's no question about this. So the money's there, the taxes are there, and we ought to be able to go forward and fix this, certainly next session, and it's almost inexcusable that we're even talking about it from my perspective. But beyond that, I just want to talk about sort of a life experience I've had watching the German system, if you will, the apprenticeship system. We labeled it pipeline in Minnesota. In fact, I just had Senator Bonhoff about that today. She's been kind of a lead author on this, but Germany has like 302 occupations, noble, good occupations within the framework of their educational system, and their apprenticeship kind of programs, where students literally do their high school and in fact can get a college degree through this apprenticeship program. And they go into companies, could be a bakery, could be a group home, whatever the case might be. They've got occupations listed for all of these kind of things. And the student learns there, not only learns their career, but also learns other things in addition, not only to sight, but also some didactic work, as we say, in the educational center. This is real kind of cagey and technical and complicated, but I do think personally that this apprenticeship route for many, many students is the way to their future. And we ought to try to make that available within the framework of our educational system. And if we do, we not only get a good worker, but we give that worker a chance to be trained and to progress in his or her career. And that's the magic of this thing, and I hope we can someday get to that point.
Thank you. Our next question is going to go to Representative Quam first. I'm going to skip the second question we said because I want to make sure we have time for audience questions since they're your potential constituents. And we'll jump right to our third question. To live independently as successfully as possible in the community, children and adults with disabilities have a variety of needs that must be met. For example, housing, transportation, employment, personal supports, and health care, to name a few. Pick one of these needs and tell us what you would do to improve the outcomes for people with disabilities in that area. And before I let you start, I just want to remind folks, if you have a question, please write it on the index card and raise it up, and we'll have people collecting them and bringing them up to me. Representative Quam.
Well, I had tried to do a solution on the employment issue. The problem is there are so many different, each individual has a different mix of programs and supports and services. Well, if you earn X amount of dollars, if you're $1 more, you lose this or you have to pay for it. And it's not the same dollar for each program. And so I sat down with Health and Human Services personnel. We need to get federal waivers, But what I would like to see us go to, and some of the programs have a little bit of it, is that if you come up to a limit and you say you earn $100 over, instead of saying, no, I can't take that raise, no, I can't work those hours, say, you know, half of that $100 you pay back to cover some of the costs, but instead of losing those benefits, you get to keep 100 and 100 goes to pay the benefits. So you end up, as you're moving along to independence, not hitting those bumps and roadblocks that make it difficult. You know, deciding, well, it's not quite enough, so I can't take those hours, or I can't take that job or the promotion. Making it easier for the person to say, here's where I want to get, and I can get there. And so it's not as easy as I thought it was a couple of years ago when I tried to work on it, but that is one of the things I would try to do, is make it a little more common sense to help a person. Because independence, living on your own, getting your job, that's a great feeling and joy that you give a person. And we should facilitate that instead of making it hard.
So Duane took employment. I think I'll take housing, because we know that we want it to be in the least restrictive environment. We want it to be independent living. And so I think it needs to be affordable. And I would suggest that we can do that by providing some housing subsidies or vouchers to assist with that. And also to have that housing there, building it.
Well, let me try healthcare. In general, and that's true probably for many of these, it isn't as much a dollars question as it is an access question. And that's particularly true in healthcare. And I think take dental as an example of that. Technically, with the medical assistance that most people with disability would have access to, technically they should be able to go someplace and get care. However, try to find a dentist that does it. And the fact is, for any number of reasons, don't. And so the solution that seems to have been emerging is kind of the apple tree dental solution, which is sort of the creation of specialized dental, and this applies, I think, as well to potential health, where you have, in a sense, a specialized clinic that specializes in doing this kind of work. So that's one of, I think, the solutions that have begun to emerge. Another really is the good heart of good Minnesota people. I said something about a lot of dentists won't do service, but there are a lot of dentists, though, that come to a special clinic to give care to persons with disabilities, and they do it pro bono, basically. And so I think there's at least a couple of those kind of avenues where, in this case, it probably isn't as much the dollars question as it is being creative and how you provide access.
Share some ideas, and I think employment is one of the vehicles toward a lot of other solutions that can happen in lives in general. Because oftentimes, understanding employment is a lot to do with changing what the word may mean when you are dealing in the normal function of running a business. Happen to run a business, know that the big doorway for success was for me to quit thinking of a job that I needed done and more to think of how can this job be restructured and made available to somebody who can come and do the job or a job that then we can integrate into our business. And as it turns out, I had a wonderful partner having possibilities assisting in doing that sort of stuff. But we had people in our business, and they were very much a part of our company. They were joking with people when they would arrive. They would joke with them when they left. They'd have their jokes about the sports teams and all that sort of thing. So they became one with our business. And I think that the other kind of model of that I'm seeing happen is what the Mayo Clinic is doing with their Max Abilities program. That's another way of restructuring the way business may typically have thought about how to incorporate and how to have their work be done and to have employed people to have a fulfilled life as they're participating in their business. So I think in employment, there is great opportunity there, but some of it is having to get into somebody's head and have them understand how to think.
Well, I think most of us could speak to all of the categories, and at least for tonight, I'm going to just pick transportation, believing, if you would, that if you're going to be independent, you're also going to want to be mobile. And that's important. Abraham Lincoln said a long time ago, the role of government is to do for people that which they cannot otherwise do for themselves. And many people can't be mobile by themselves. And so just thinking about that, now we know, and I'm on the transportation committee, we've been at loggerheads for a couple of years on what the right transportation bill is. There's going to be, there's no secret about that. But be assured of this, there will be a transportation bill. And so, at least I'm speaking to myself now, let's just make sure when that transportation bill comes forward that there's money set aside in the transit component to take care of things like ZIPs, you know, full-fledged ZIPs program that's available nights, weekends, and when people really need it. Because right now it's somewhat limited. It's not everything that we'd maybe like it to have, to be rather. And so I think there's opportunities in that transportation areas that we can take advantage of within the framework of a new transportation bill, and we shouldn't forget it because it's awfully important. A lot of people in this audience know that.
Well, when I read this question a few days ago, there's two that really stuck out to me. It was employment and transportation. For a long time I've worked for Hy-Vee, and I've worked with many people who have disabilities and have special needs. And the biggest problem that they always tell me is that they have problems getting to and from work. And, you know, I really think that that could be a part where the government could step in and sort of set up a partnership with the businesses and the homes that help, or the organizations that help these people, you know, set up some kind of busing schedule or something to that effect, a transport schedule that could help these people with disabilities get to and from the places that they need so they can be employed. And, you know, a lot of these people, you know, there's one particular, a woman named Janet that I work with at Hy-Vee. She always has a smile on her face. She loves her job. And she tells us that all the time, and how big of a difference that makes her to be able to go out and be in the community and, you know, have a role, play her part. And, you know, to deny someone that because they can't get a ride to and from work, it's not smart. You know, they want to do their part, and that's a big way that we can make a difference.
So I looked at this, of course, as Dave said, you know, you just want to talk about all of them, and I was going to talk about transportation, but now I don't have to because Dave said it, transit, we need transit. You know, that's you know, we talk about, you know, one of the big breakdowns this session was, oh, are we going to have transit or roads and bridges? Well, you got to have both. You got to have both. But what I thought I'd say, though, is for both employment and healthcare, I think we need statewide broadband. We need a really good broadband network in all areas of the state. This would help all of us, but in particular, I think it would really help people with disabilities. You know, there are many jobs now that you can do from your own home if you have good broadband, both good upload and download speeds, and you can do it from any part of the state if you have that infrastructure. And then we talked in another forum about healthcare. There's a lot of telemedicine going on. Of course, it doesn't replace all of our healthcare needs, and hopefully it never will. But it certainly would give people with disabilities a lot more connection to needed services in a lot of cases. So that's kind of two areas to focus on, but really one big solution that would really help a lot of us, not just people with disabilities, but a lot of us, and help young people be more interested in staying in the state.
Well, as a realtor, I'll take on housing. I think, again, within our communities, we have that as an issue anyway, just affordable housing in general. So, you know, to your point earlier, I think that's something that is worthy of bringing up. Within folks with disabilities, I think one of the things that obviously has happened recently is the Olmsted decision and the impacts that has had on where people are able to live, and sometimes when you look at the decisions that were made, I know like Wayne House here locally is constantly fighting basically a battle because people want to live in a specific environment with the resources and access to the care that they need, but the number of people that can live in the specific under one roof type of rules have really highlighted that maybe the pendulum has become too restrictive and hurt what choices people with disabilities have. And I think in some ways the whole concept of the Olmsted decision empowering people with disabilities has almost gone in reverse by just kind of narrowing that down and looking at a specific number of people within under a roof, which I know some facilities have done some workarounds on things like that too, but those types of decisions being made in that way sometimes seem really inefficient. So, you know, also within housing, you know, making sure that people who want to stay within their family dynamic or their own homes, possibly, you know, providing more support or tax credits for configuring or making it so someone can live in single family houses that are in our neighborhoods that maybe weren't originally built to the ADA standards or whatever it might fall in the category of. So just some supports on that end also. Thank you.
Many points I agree with: transportation, housing, broadband. Last week I was fortunate enough to go to Bear Creek Services, and I really liked their B-Sales program, how it's moving into independent living, and how that's going to cut a lot of costs. I was just amazed at the cost savings and how it can pay for itself in a short period of time. And that program I like, and I know that Cardinal, I think, has something very similar to that as well. So I mean, there's something, you know, like that, where they can be independent, and then they can get a job and get moved around, and or maybe work from home, but doing something and being part of something also helps with then their confidence, and also helps with mental health too. Because a lot of things that, you know, if you feel worthless, it'll bring you down. And these are the things, and having that value and getting that chance to move towards independent living. And I know sometimes it doesn't work, so also coming up with a plan just in case it doesn't work, they don't lose their bed or in their room in the other house. So I mean, those are certain things you can work through, but I like those kind of programs like that. So like I said, transportation, housing, broadband, I like that that B-Sales program, and things like that would be very good.
So, remember when I said our #1 crisis we face in our county is employee shortage, right? We have a worker shortage. That means we need to get everybody off the bench, because we need everybody working. And that includes making it easier for people with disabilities to work. For one thing, when we work, we feel useful. We feel like we're part of society. So it has a big benefit to us. The other thing that we could do, and Tina brought it up, broadband. Why not? We have to increase the broadband capability. Hey, do you know what my high-speed broadband is at home? I'm in Rochester Township. 3 download. You can't work at 3 download. We need to increase the broadband across the state so that can provide people, especially people who are bedridden or home-ridden, can actually work and feel like they're contributing to our society. And by doing that, that worker solution, that dovetails into everything, right? Because if you can't always work at home, we have a transportation issue, which to me means you have to come up with mass transit and some other solutions that are easy for people to get to work. And then that leads into another problem we have, which is the second issue in our county, which is affordable housing. And those have all been talked about. But I think we have to start with employment. We have to get everybody working, and we have to do everything we can to promote programs that will allow people with disabilities, no matter what they are, to contribute to our society for all the reasons that I've already said.
And Senator Nelson, before I let you go, I'm just going to remind folks, if you have a question, Sarah right there will pick it up, just hold it up in the air. And then Senator Senjem, the next question, we're going to start with you, just so you know.
Great. So about independence, that's really what it's all about, is living to the maximum of your abilities and living independently. And all of these things that we have spoken about and that colleagues up and down the line here have spoken about are important. And I'll just kind of wrap them around 2 issues. One, of course, is employment. A couple things that we should do there, we could do. Autistic kids, high-functioning autistic kids, they succeed well in the school district, they graduate and they don't have those work supports to do well in the workforce. I sponsored a bill with Representative Norton, which actually passed as a pilot project, to actually help provide those work supports for high-functioning autistic kids as they leave high school so that they are successful in the workforce. Another issue, again, that's helpful is getting people connected with the jobs that exist. The Workforce Development Center is great to do that. I authored the bill that funded that co-location of the Workforce Development Center right out at the RCTC campus, so the education is easily achieved there seamlessly, so I think that's important. And then when we talk about that employment, we cannot forget transportation. And it's been mentioned here, but I'll just share with you what some of my constituents have told me. The problem is with the taxi cab. So it's not just transit, it's our cab system. They don't operate in the evening time or on Saturdays. So if you want to go to a concert down at the Mayo Civic Center and you happen to be in a wheelchair, you're out of luck. There is no transportation except 8 to 5 Monday through Friday. That's what happened during the last year. We've been having some town halls on this, trying to get additional transportation services so people who have wheelchairs actually can move and get to places other than during the workday. I think that will be helpful. Our society, fortunately, is changing. We're talking about things like universal design in housing that helps people stay in homes longer, and we ought to be thinking about that in transportation as well. Looking at our cabs, for example, making sure that they have that universal design so the wheelchair can just slide right in there, and those are very accessible now. Certainly other cities are doing those. It's a citywide issue, but I think it's something that we can, as state legislators, we can bring to the fore for attention for our city officials to look at, just like they would look at building design. We don't do that at the state level, but we can actually bring these issues forward and hope that the locals will look into those things as they do planning and zoning and such.
Thank you. So Senator Senjem, we're going to start with you. We're going to turn to audience questions now, and we're going to go down that way and wrap back around. And then our next question will start with you, Senator Nelson. So our first question to Senator Senjem: Olmsted supports living situations that support the level of disability. This does not mean a one-size-fits-all integrated into the community model or just 4-room group homes. What is Minnesota doing to more fully realize the goals of Olmsted and meet the needs of all people with disabilities? And secondarily, how do you feel, or how do you all feel about the potential closing of Wing House to the cost of upwards of $1 million a year? And Representative Pierson, I know you already touched on this, but we'll start.
What house?
Wing House. So, we'll start with Senator Senjem.
All right. You know, I'm just good. I don't know a lot about Wing House.
Just wing it.
Wing it. I'm gonna wing it. I would say, and we had a thing out at the cemetery at State Hospital yesterday, and I didn't read it, but back in 2010, the state legislature actually passed a resolution. It doesn't do that often where you get a joint resolution. And talked about state hospitals and mental illness and disabilities and the way people had been treated in those facilities through the years. I'm sure with well-intended people, as was said earlier, it was the state of the art. But I think we know now that some of that wasn't necessarily what we believed it probably should have been. My own mother included in the state hospital. But this was a cemetery dedication where we're reinstalling, if you will, cemetery markers. But that resolution talked, and I won't go through it, it was rather lengthy, but the last sentence basically said that the legislature would commit itself, going on into the future, to take care of and recognize the needs of people with disabilities, people with mental illness, and that we would face up to that in it says a reactive sort of manner. And I think irrespective of what the issue is out there, with respect to all of the issues that we talk about that are affecting people with disabilities, mentally ill people, autistic people, on and on and on, That's what we need to do. We need to have a legislative conscience about disabilities and the needs that you face. And I'll go back to what Abe Lincoln said, about taking care of the needs of people that can't otherwise be taken care of by those people. That's an important, I think, premise, an important guidepost that we need to do and live to and think about every day of our life in the legislature. So I'm not going to answer these questions specifically because, frankly, I don't know all those answers. But I do have a heart with respect to this issue. And I want to work with Steve and Kurt and others and you in terms of making sure that some of this stuff passes the legislature.
I'm sorry to do this, but I need another,
You
short
bet, I
run
know
of
it
it.
was a long one. Olmsted supports living situations that support the level of disability. This does not mean a one-size-fits-all integrated into the community model or just four-room group homes. What is Minnesota doing to more fully realize the goal of Olmsted and meet the needs of all people with disabilities? And then the second part was, how do you all feel about the potential closing of Wing House, the cost of upwards of $1 million a year?
Okay, I can confidently answer the last one because I don't know. So, forgive me for that. On the other issue, I think that Dave actually just hit it, and I would confirm that a person, we see the world slightly differently. We don't see it a lot differently, but we see it just slightly differently. That we need to have more times when we are committed to these basic tenets of public service and of what the government, or in this case the legislature, is intending to do. We need to understand that these are our social responsibilities, that we can no longer live in a way or in a world where we become so enamored with winning and with being the best and charging forward individually that we have to slow that down. That societal goal, structure that we have become enamored with. We have to get to the point where we are starting to actually see and care for all of us. And I think that it wrapped up in this way is to allow people to become part of society, have goals of society that bring the realization of life into their lives. And I think that those basic tenets are what would draw together legislative action, no matter what party we would be standing in.
Well, I'm not sure about Wing House either, so I'll join the crowd of somebody who's an expert on that can comment to it. I have a hunch I kind of know the model that's involved. A bunch of years ago, the state was starting to move toward a new model, and the state knew exactly what it ought to be. It ought to be this kind of numbers in each house and so forth. And at that time, in Hiawatha Homes on the Hill, it didn't match the model. And the state seemed to think, well, then we should just dissolve it, and you ought to break it up, and people ought to move other places. And we went into a heck of a battle, and ended up compromising something that I think is at least workable anyway, so the facility remains in a little bit different configuration. I use that sort of as an indication, really, that what may sound good and may have been done for good purposes in the Olmsted decision, when it starts turning into a bureaucracy that thinks it knows best at every almost micro level, and pretty soon we are managing with what I call kind of the clipboard mentality. That is, you go through and you check off things. That's not the way to run quality. I've been involved in quality at IBM, and we didn't do it that kind of way. What we said really is, what's really important? What's really important are good outcomes and customer satisfaction. Now, it's a little complicated around that, but what is that? Well, actually, Cindy would know all about it. It's called Southeast Minnesota Quality Assurance Project. And it was built on that kind of notion. It was built on the notion that you know who knows best? The people that are being served and their families. They really know best. And if you use scientific methods, you can determine that. And you can license based on that and all kinds of things. You don't need somebody with a doctor's degree with that clipboard telling you. It is really common sense. And I think that's kind of the word to end with here. In this kind of thing, really, what we need is we need to be able to intervene, if you will, with common sense. If it feels like it's starting to drift too far to be a one-size-fits-all, there ought to be a way to come back again. I mentioned before a little bit about 245D, and it has sort of the scent of some of that kind of thing in it. And what is intended to be good, in some cases, becomes destructive. And so what we need is the ability somehow to bring it back to common sense.
Thank you. Well, we know one size doesn't fit all. And so what we really need is to expand the choices. Broaden our housing options. I have not read about the closing of Wing House either, but I think I would just say that what Paul Wellstone said is we all do better when we all do better, and just pulling together to make it happen.
Well, you know, building off a little bit of what Fran said, Homestead Plan, you've got a judge interdicting with a committee and agency of experts, and I think the one thing you're missing are the people that actually are involved and suffer the impacts of this great and glorious plan that, you know, has to be, you know, too many lawyers are in the legislature because laws are written like laws instead of like, you know, common sense, you know, how people can understand and talk to things. So, you know, I submitted a bill and it was one sentence and it became, you know, a couple pages because of what you have to throw in. And I think what we need to do is interject, you know, more of the people that are involved into the process so we don't end up with something that looks great on paper but just causes lots of problems for the people on the ground. The other issue is, it's sort of been touched on, I don't want to blame the media, but, ooh, it's shiny, they don't agree. You know, 80% of the stuff we agree on. There are issues, and mainly issues that we're talking about tonight, that party doesn't matter. It's the people. And you've got people up in the legislature that care passionately, and they will strive and work to get a solution, but they're not always as intelligent as the people in the audience. So that's why you and the public and you and the people involved need to feed us so that when we do something, that we do it right and don't give unintended consequences and hardships and unworkable mandates that ruin good things that we've got and have had for decades.
Well, I think what we're hearing is that things are often well-intended, like the old Meadow Plan. Full inclusion, more choice, more opportunities. Sometimes the translation of that doesn't lend to what the intended outcome was. And I think Wing House is a clear example of that. The fact that, and I'll say Wing House is in my neighborhood. It's less than a mile from my house. And I go by it if I take a shortcut to get home. So Wing House is an example where it's working. It's a traumatic brain injury, mostly, and they are doing a great job. But my understanding is that the Olmsted Plan now is saying, no, this is not going to work, because there's 17, I think, people at the Wing House. And the outcomes are great, great customer satisfaction, lower cost, everybody's happy, except the government. And the government has come in and is basically saying it's not going to work. And we're going to make sure that you all move into group homes that only have 4 people, have 4 spots, is basically the idea. That's an example of what's really wrong with things that are well intended. That's not customer choice when that happens. And so that's where we need to be more flexible, and we need to listen to the people that we're actually trying to support and help. This idea that the government always knows best is not right. You know best. And this idea that things come down from the top is wrong. Things ought to come up from the bottom. We should be listening to the Wing House. We ought to be looking at why are things working so well there. Maybe that's a model that we can use in other places as well. So I think it's problematic. It's a Supreme Court, a U.S. Supreme Court decision, the Olmstead Plan. But a lot of times, what I have found is people kind of just they just kind of blame the Olmstead Plan, right? Saying there's nothing we can do about it. But a lot of times, if you question further, it is the interpretation of that plan. And that's where the state can come in and look at the interpretation of the Olmstead Plan. And we need to be offering more flexibility based upon results and customer service, satisfaction.
So like pretty much everyone down here, I'm not quite familiar with all the details on the closing of the house, except for what was just alluded to. But I do agree that we need to have a system where we have multiple choices, because it's not a one-size-fit-all system. We all know that, right? I mean, and Mr. Quam, I'm offended as a lawyer. Because my job, I solve problems.
Who was going to take the bait?
Yeah, I know. I'm silly enough to do that, because that's what I do for a living, is I solve problems. So this is not anything that I see as insurmountable. This is something where, in my profession, I walk in, I solve problems like this. I work with people across the aisle to come up with solutions. And quite frankly, I'm the first to admit I'm usually not the one who knows all the details. It's my client or the people who are involved in the mess. So let's talk to the people who are the subject matter experts and figure out what's a good, common sense solution. And it can be done. And I think pretty much all of us are on the same page up here. This is not a partisan issue. This is about how do we treat our brothers and sisters well, and how do we do right. And that we can all figure that out. It's just sometimes there are wrinkles in the road, and then you figure out, oh, this is a wrinkle. We need to find a creative solution to the problem, and that can be done. I don't see how that can't be done. And sometimes that's at a state level, and sometimes that's at a county level. But certainly as a state legislature, I'd be one that would be working with the county and with you to make sure we come up with a workaround so that we can serve all of our brothers and sisters and get their needs met.
In agreement with everyone, and I'm not a lawyer, so I didn't take a shot, but I'm a teacher too, and as a teacher you can find the middle ground. You can have 30-some kids in the classroom, and we're trying to get all of them to learn. And sometimes being individualized and personalized can make it difficult. But there's two sides to every story, and somewhere in the middle is the truth. And there could be two sides to a problem, and somewhere in the middle is a solution. So we got to find a way to come in together and work on these solutions. Flexibility is big. You have to be able to work with with people. Also, you can't be the experts up here. You can't know everything. So that's why you have to rely on your constituents and rely on these groups. And that's kind of what I've always been touting to say. That's I kind of say transformational leadership is something that I promote. Is that's working elbow to elbow, shoulder to shoulder with people, regardless who gets the credit and regardless who gets the blame. But make sure that we work together and and get the best and brightest around it, and then take it with you up there and make it work.
Well, I do know a little bit about Wing House. I was at a chamber event one morning, and Casey was bending my ear on the issue, and then was gracious enough to invite me to take a tour, and I followed up with that, and it really is a facility that is unlike anything else that you see in our community. It blends so well into the neighborhood that when she was telling me the address of it, I knew there had been a listing with my brokerage within a couple of doors, because I was helping someone look at that property. And I was, no, that can't be the right address, because I would have noticed something like that. But it is just this great resource within our community. Mr. Austinson, though, for not knowing about Wing House, really does hit a lot of the answers to the question. I mean, the reality is we need flexibility in this. The clients, they need the options, and the resource that's there for those folks, the additional services that are provided to them cannot be duplicated in homes of 4 people. And so when we know the Olmstead decision was a reaction to a very, very bad problem that our society faced, like I said earlier, the pendulum just really has swung so hard and so far, and the rules are so brutal for facilities that are providing excellent options and excellent service. For me, it creates a community atmosphere, was what I think I would mention about my experience just having toured Wing House. And to take that away from the individuals who have made their decision to stay there and have those resources there, to take that community away is exactly the opposite philosophy of what the Olmsted decision was intended to do. So like Senator Nelson said, that has to do with interpretation. How do we reevaluate this so that we can justify variances or whatever types of accommodations can be made to provide the best quality service for folks who have those needs. Thanks. Jeez. I didn't see a sign.
So I think you're not going to find a lot of disagreement up here. You know, I went to that lovely ceremony on Sunday that Senator Senjem was at, and we were kind of chatting about this. You know, that the state hospital, no one thought that they were doing a bad thing. You know, this was a hospital, and it was kind of that at that time. That was, you know, that was what we had, and you know, certainly no one wants to go back to the bad old days, because now, of course, we realize how horrible that was for so many people. I mean, and you know, ending up then in the cemetery with just a coffee can for a marker and a number, not even a name. So no one wants to go back there, but you know, it is true that, you know, when we make laws, or when Congress makes laws, or when the Supreme Court makes a decision based on our laws about how to protect vulnerable people, how to give people with disabilities or other vulnerabilities the best possible life. You know, it's kind of a broad thing, and it doesn't mean that it always works in every situation. And actually, it has kind of come up, and I am kind of interested in the idea that even though we want to give people with disabilities as much choice as possible, and the whole voice review thing, which I've been very supportive of over the years and have worked with folks on that, you know, the idea that what is quality? Quality is what that person thinks it is, right? That's quality is what, you know, for each of us, what's quality in my life? Well, I'm going to decide what that is, thank you very much, and we all should be able to do that. So, you know, we try, and the Olmsted decision is trying to do that. And does that mean that in every case that, you know, people should be in these really, really small settings and stuff? Well, no, because not everybody wants to do that. So the folks from Wing House have contacted me, and I have, and thank you for reminding me, because I have asked DHS a couple of times to respond and haven't gotten a response about, you know, what can we do about this? Because I think, you know, I agree, it's, you know, it's a matter of having different settings that meet different needs. Now, one thing that's really kind of hopeful for me, you know, today in Rochester there was a meeting of the Governor's Task Force on Mental Health. And I went and sat through part of it, and of course I was sitting there thinking, I'm so glad I'm not on this thing, because it's excruciating, hard work. But I'm hoping that when they come out with their recommendations are going to, of course, we're talking mental health, but you know, people with mental illness and CD problems, that's a disability. It's all covered. And something like Wing House, you know, we're going to be looking at the whole system and trying to make a better system for people with mental health issues. And a better system has to have a lot of different components in it. And so I'm really looking forward to getting that report, because this is a complicated issue. There are so many ins and outs. And before I see I'm out of time, I'm just going to say one quick other thing. You know, we all like to say, oh, regulations, terrible regulations, they're our problem, we should get rid of them. But what are we talking about here? Yes, sometimes regulations go too far. Sometimes regulations don't seem to make any sense. But regulations are an attempt to protect vulnerable people. And so I don't think we want to go back to say, let's just get rid of all the regulations. Does anybody in this room think that would be a good thing? No. Because it's great if you've got somebody looking out for you and advocating for you, and you've got the wherewithal to do that. But if you don't, we want to make sure that people, we want to make sure that there's some layer of protection for people, and hopefully we can, keep adjusting that to make sure that we're not overprotecting and over-regulating, but that taxpayer money is well spent and goes to the things it's supposed to go to.
Well, there's been plenty said on this question. I'm going to try and keep my answer short. It seems to me that the problem is that the control of all of these situations of the housing needs of everybody, it's an individual need. It's going to vary based on each case, and the control of that needs to go back to the facilities in charge here. They need to be able to say, this person is better suited for this kind of environment, and this person can prosper in a group environment. So we need to give that control back to these facilities rather than the state having their hand in it.
Thank you. So I know I want to, with 4 legislative districts, 2 Senate districts, I want to give our audience time at the end to talk to their individual candidates. So we're at our closing statement time. We have, a lot of really good questions that I wish we would have gotten to, but I really encourage you, if you didn't get your question answered, to ask your legislators or candidates.
Could you email us the questions and we could try to respond to as many of them as we're able to, and you can recirculate?
But I'm also going to sneak in one final question and ask you with your closing statements to answer this question, and then also give a very brief closing statement. So the question is, how do we help employers see the value added by hiring people with disabilities? And the first question is for you.
Oh, I think that is an excellent question. I think we have some great examples here in this area. I was just at the Ability Building Center 60th anniversary, possibilities. They do that. They provide job supports, and they people with special needs are working in our community all across in many different shops and businesses, and they're highly successful, just like Janet. I know Janet, exactly. And so I think it's this wonderful melding of, we have the nonprofits, like Possibilities, ABC, others, then, and the government's involved too with the rehabilitation and training funding, but then we have these wonderful benefactors who step up and also help provide the funding for the additional training and work supports. And then we have these wonderful employers who bring openings and bring people in to work with them. And then, of course, it's very important that we have a community that appreciates and supports all the abilities, whatever one may bring to the situation. And I think what we have in Rochester is very unique. I'm concerned that some other smaller communities might not have the employer-benefactor connection that we have here. But I think we've got something that's really working here. I hope we can continue to do that and expand that. Oh, sure. All right. Well, we've had a great long night here, but I'm really sad that I didn't get to hear from you. I'll just say that I do hope we'll get those questions like Rep. Pierson suggested, because I think it was last year or maybe the year before, Naomi, where some of the questions and concerns that were brought up right here at this forum ended up at the state legislature at my desk with a conference call working on some of these issues, specifically concerning the cliff. I know you were there, and Naomi was there, I think you were there, and that is so important, and I am sorry we're not getting to that tonight, but know that I am there to work to empower all people. That's the goal, not to empower government, not to build political blocks, but to empower people through choices. And I hope I can earn your support once again. Thank you.
I believe I talked a little bit earlier about the employment situation and some ideas at that time. The other solution that we have is there's an education for employers, right, that we have to work on, and that includes funding to, at least supporting current private employers who are assisting people with disabilities entering into the workforce and making sure they have the funds to reach out to potential employers, so the employer can understand, kind of like Duane was talking earlier, let's reconfigure the way you're thinking about how the job can be done. And how can we make those changes so that everybody, you know, can work. And because, as I mentioned, we need everybody off the bench, right? We have an employee, this is a significant issue facing us. We need everybody working. And that means we need to do everything we can to make sure everybody who can work is able to work to the fullest of their possibility. And then, in closing, I'll stay around so I can answer any of your questions. I wish we had time for more, but I think when you have, I think, is this everyone? Oh, we're missing one person? This is almost everyone who's looking to serve you over the next 2 to 4 years. So, but I'll stick around, and I hope to have your support either, I guess, tomorrow if you vote early, or on November 8th. Thanks.
You know, working in Byron, we see, you know, ABC and possibilities come in, and they're great programs. We got to be able to come up with ways for like an apprenticeship, internships, and other things that will incentivize other places to do that as well. It's just awesome. I get to see some of the guys, you know, working back there, you know, washing dishes, and then we go back there and we help them out. We go help. They're coming around in the classrooms. It's just really heartwarming, and just the relationships. You know, I have one we always kind of have to knuckle with our elbows. You know, so it's you build those kind of relationships when they come to those places, and it makes them feel self-worth. So, absolutely support those. For just kind of wrap up for me, like I said, you know, the biggest thing I would like to see is people getting actually to the voting booths and voting. We have to get your feet there. It's one thing to say this or that, but regardless if you vote for me, which I'd like you to vote for me, and I know everyone here would say that they like to vote for them, but the biggest thing, and the most important thing is we're Minnesotans, so we usually lead the nation in voting. Let's do it again, all right? And I would just say, whoever you vote for, vote.
Yeah, to answer the question, I think, again, some of the public-private partnerships that are out there, continuing to strengthen and incentivize those. When I first moved to Rochester, I was actually selling cars. So please don't use that as a reason to not vote for me. But back at that time, a young guy came into the dealership one time and was shopping for a car. He was very hard to understand, and I didn't know much about him. And we got to know each other over time. Actually, because he bought a car from another salesman, and that salesman was never around when my friend would show up. And over the years, we've just been close and talked and always hung out and spent time together. And he was a stalker. Shelves, stocking shelves. I'm not sure I pronounced that properly, but I hope you heard it right. And he worked very hard. He got that initial job. I actually just learned this year through ABC, and I had never known that. Well, now he's in the Gonda building on the 14th floor working custodial for Mayo Clinic, and he's definitely contributing. He has no needs for ABC or any other services, and just a wonderful person, and has become a true friend over the years, and that's, you know, getting that started and getting people the training and the workforce and the background and the confidence to be able to move into the community and participate in the workforce. That's just so valuable, not just to my friend, but to all of us. I mean, we definitely all thrive and are better off because of that. I'm out of time. How is that possible? Because I did just want to mention Duane's point, you know, the scalability of the bill, where, because I remember the one specific story. I don't mean to steal your story if you're going to share it. I'm going to go over my time limit. I'm sorry. But specifically, the story was this young lady working at a grocery store had been promoted or was going to get a pay raise. And she went home and they ran the numbers. She'd lose her health care if she took the pay raise. So she had to turn it down. Being able to scale that, making sure folks can fully participate in the workforce and achieve and thrive and not lose all of their benefit when they actually do rise up. And so for my closing statement, I want to thank you for being here, for being engaged in our community and in the whole elective process. And if you have any questions, Nels@nels.com is my email address if you didn't even get your question in tonight. So thank you.
Could you just repeat the question?
How do we help employers see the value added of hiring people with disabilities?
Okay. So in answer to that, I think that the economy is helping us with that. You know, the fact that we do have worker shortages. And I think that every time a person with disabilities gets into a job and is successful, it helps employers see the value of hiring another person with disabilities. And so I was involved as well a few years ago in getting the program going that gave some support to people with autism, children who were graduating from high school and then just needed a little help to get into the workforce. I think the more we see these kinds of things, the more employers will see them. So turning to my closing statement, you know, it's so interesting. I don't know about all of you, but I can hardly watch the TV these days, you know? It's the presidential election has just turned so ugly and so horrible. And yet, you know, I constantly tell people, you gotta look at the state. You gotta pay attention to those other offices because so much of that is what impacts your lives. And that's what I think what we're all talking about here. Why are we talking about these things? Because what happens in St. Paul really, no, it's not everything. We have to deal with the Olmsted decision and a lot of the funding comes from the feds and there are a lot of rules and so on and so on. But a lot of very important decisions are made in St. Paul. And it really matters who you elect to make those decisions. And, you know, again, I think that there's no question that, you know, there's a lot of shared value here that, I mean, no one is gonna come here and say to you, I don't care about people with disabilities, right? Who's gonna say that? But the real question is, what are we gonna do to make things happen? Over the last couple years, you saw a lot of empty promises, and those who worked at the Capitol really saw this. I'm not gonna go into the details, but it was really discouraging. There was a lot of kind of, you know, I would say false promises made, and it was really, really bad. But, you know, we do things in Minnesota. Again, I just would close by saying that I really believe that Minnesotans want to do well for everyone. Minnesotans are proud of the fact that we have good services in this state. Not the best they can be, for sure, but a lot better than a lot of other places. And why? Not only because we care about it, but because we pay for it. And, you know, obviously money isn't everything, but you can't pay people to be caregivers for people with disabilities. I mean, these are waiver programs. These are, you know, this is taxpayer money. And the taxpayers of Minnesota have been very generous. And the legislature, some of us have voted to provide the taxes. That continues to provide the services. So, you know, that's a very important thing to think about as we go forward here. I hope that we will continue to be a state where we are proud of the services that we provide to people and that we feel, that we continue to feel like we're all in it together, that we're all pieces of each other's puzzle, and that everybody has worth and value. So, thank you.
So I believe the question was about how employers can take a greater role in
How
this.
do we help employers see the value added of hiring people with disabilities?
So I think how you do that is get the employers together. See those businesses who already have plenty of people with disabilities hired. Make the sort of partnership I had talked about earlier between businesses and organizations in different types of homes to you know, get these people jobs, employment that they'd like to have, and in part of that, you know, the government supporting that by helping with the transportation that we discussed earlier. And I just wanted to thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you for the organizations who put this on. It really helps a lot of us, the voters and the candidates in many ways. So thank you.
Well, to the question, and Senator Nelson referred to it, in terms of getting employer interest in enthusiasm with respect to hiring disabled people. Really, and I'll buy the ticket, just go to the ABC banquet, and there may be other ones as well, but when you see these individuals getting their 5, 10, 15, 20, up to 35 years in terms of employment services, when you see the excitement of these people, and then they all get to give their little, I don't know, 15, 20-minute, second speech, and they're jumping, and they're just totally thankful to ABC. You know, all you hear is ABC, 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 in terms of their enthusiasm for what they're doing and for the company that they're working for. And you just know that those employees are going to be there every day. They're going to be doing their best. They're excited about their job. And if you're an employer, and if you don't sense that when you're there, because I did, if you don't sense that, you don't have a pulse, as I often say. You're just dead, because this thing is just contagious. So, and in respect to just wrapping it up, thank you for coming tonight. Thank you for the opportunity that I've had to, you've given me, some of you probably have, in terms of serving in the Minnesota Senate. It's been a great honor and frankly a very special privilege. As I sat down this year, this campaign season, if you will, to think about, okay, Dave Senjem, what do you want to do this? What do you want to stand for? What do you want your legislative life going forward to be? And it's on the card, and I think a number of us have cards back there, and they're usually take them along. But as I sat down and just went inside myself, and around here, and this was a couple months ago, mental health resources, nursing and group home funding, and a few others, actually 4 others. But that's my passion going forward. And I didn't write these things on here lightly. I thought a lot about them, because if I didn't want to do it, I shouldn't put it on there. So going forward, I just say, you know, look for candidates that have passion, compassion. You know, I often say, don't like dumb. We don't like to do dumb in the state legislature. We shouldn't. But all too often, well-intended efforts end up with, if you will, dumb consequences. When we try in St. Paul, 201 of us, when we try to assemble that perfect law that's going to do everything perfectly for everything, we stumble every time. Earlier in this evening, we talked a lot about flexibility. To the extent we can, we have to offer that flexibility with respect to how we deal with disabilities, mental illness, all kinds of afflictions like this, because every person's different. Absolutely every person's different. We have to recognize that. It's hard to do that in law, but we have to do the best we can to provide that flexibility to the people back home that know best how to take care of their friends and neighbors in the disability community. So thank you so much for being here, and I really appreciate representing you.
To the question, I will tell you that having ran a business in town, the most important thing to do is to treat, be careful now, treat business owners with the remedial help they need. They don't understand. They don't see the path. They need to be guided down that path. There's a few people here that I recognize their faces. These are businessmen sitting here listening to me say this. The fact is that business people running businesses oftentimes think in this one model of a solution without any variation to the sides. And they're very unlikely to break that mold, because it's an engine that they've got going and they will make it continue to function. Somebody needs to come in and talk to them, give them some remedial understanding that there are other ways, and there are ways that you would impact other people's lives, and to show them that that's the opportunity that's there. I will tell you that the reason we had the gentleman come to our place was because somebody did that. I mean, I was a quick learner. I only needed 15 minutes, and they were on site. We had a program all figured out. We took away all the barriers that would have stopped it. As it turns out, we had a stairway, so that was the barrier that I couldn't do anything about. But beyond that, we took away anything else that would have constructed itself as a barrier. So I think sometimes that's what it takes, some advocacy at the end of the day. some advocacy either by somebody that's in your service, whether it's Possibilities or ABC or any of the things. Somebody is going to have to be that connecting, give them a little remedial help in understanding how this would work. And then oftentimes they're more than willing to do the solution because as Dave shared, there's great rewards in having that solution. But they need to hear the story. They need to know that I could have lived my whole life and have never had a connection to Brian. My whole life. But somebody decided that he should have a job at the company that I was running. And they showed me how that could happen. And I got to know Brian then from that. So those are the things that happen. You know, we will just live our lives if we're business owners. We'll keep the engine running and not get off the track. So I think you need to remember advocacy will matter to the answer to that question. Thanks so much for giving me an opportunity. I made a joke with the young lady that's got the camera back there. I walked in and she came up to me aggressively and greeted me and said, "Hi, I'd like to put you in front of the camera." And I said, "You just gave a politician the most wonderful compliment. We love to have somebody say, 'Come and talk to my toy.'" You know? So I am honored that you listened. I am also buoyed up by the fact that there were a bunch of things here tonight that I needed to learn. I will learn some of them. I probably won't learn all of them. I will need help as we go through life. I wanted to share the story that Tina brought up earlier. I went to the morning session. I think Tina might have went to the afternoon part of it. They are dealing with mental health, a new effort to structure how mental health delivery systems will work. Their intention is to include and probably connect the other parts that function with mental health, which are chemical abuse, that sort of thing. I'm well out of time. So that thing, she is right. That discussion was the kind of thing that made my brain hurt. There are incredible intricacies of how to merge these gigantic systems that are all about individuals getting surveyed, how to merge that together into a system that will function. And I will tell you, there were 25-ish people there, I think, around the table, something like that, maybe 30. They were giving every ounce of their intellect to try to solve these problems. And they were struggling like crazy with little nuances. The Olmsted decision became a big player in the morning. I don't know if it continued all day long. But there are incredible roadblocks as they are trying to put this together. Know that these people are trying hard and they are doing their best work for you.
Excuse me, to the question, I think usually you build on success, and it isn't fair at all to characterize the employer community as being completely blind to this. There's a lot of employment that goes on already, and what we need to do is to build on that success. Rochester has, if not the largest, the second largest Chamber of Commerce in the state. What a great resource that is. And I know the head of the Chamber of Commerce, and he came to our open house that we had. He's been extremely supportive. I know that he would do all he could to sort of build coalitions and to help people understand and to expand the employment opportunities. So that's what on the employment side. I am struck by an opportunity that we have tonight. I hope we caught it. It seems to me that the Winghouse story is one that we could all be together as a community and to advocate and fight for. We ought to be unified. I don't care, across the board candidates. There's no reason, I mean, I'm signed up, okay? I hope we all sign up. And I hope beyond those of us who are candidates that you're signed up. There is strength in numbers. We don't have to, because I believe, I'll bet, there's a misinterpretation there someplace. I had to go all the way to Washington, D.C. to settle an issue on whether or not you could have bed rails in nursing homes. This is a long story, crazy thing. But what I found was everybody was blaming everybody else. And you couldn't find the source. So you finally have to just run it over. And here's a great opportunity. So I leave here personally to whatever I can, and I hope somebody will sort of help mushroom this force, that we do something about it. And I'll, just one final, and that is, rather than about me, about you. Thank you for what you do. In this room are the special people who care for other people, the special people who have needs, the family members, the supporters of the cause. For every one of you, God bless you.
I think what I'll do is I'll make my closing statement part of my answer to the question. So how do we help employers see the importance of hiring people with disabilities? You can't expect a teacher not to address a teaching moment, because this is definitely a teaching moment. And I think it's all about our core values. And just to share with you, taught 40 years at Cass in Manorville. And one of the things that I kept was a little ruler that was given to me by my Sunday school teacher. Honestly, it said, treat others the way you want to be treated. It's that simple. It's about inclusion. It's about modeling. It is about respect. It is about celebrating differences. And just to end with the idea that we enrich our own lives by enriching the lives of others. So thank you for the opportunity of being here tonight. I've learned a lot, and yeah.
Knowledge and understanding of what is possible. We need to share the success stories with the Chamber and different organizations. It's that knowledge and understanding what is possible that will let people understand that they have employees, future employees out there that can succeed and help their business succeed. And that's what we have to do to take care of this employment issue. It's just a simple thing of knowledge and shining a bright light on all the successes that we've seen in the lives of those around us. Now, personally, let you know a little bit about me. My first bill was something that I had learned. I was at a RCTC faculty union meeting, and they had a problem with something, and that's where I got the idea, got a bill drafted and passed. But also as a freshman, I had an opportunity to carry the community paramedic bill, which is a good bill. But another member came and said, hey, can I carry that? I said, fine. I don't have to be the chief author and get the credit, but I want to make sure it's good. So I had the people come 5 times to meet and get the verbiage right. And I think we've got a good bill. And that's the type of thing that we can leverage in the smaller communities, that approach. But again, I think we need to listen, and we need to not care who gets the credit.
Well, thank you all for being here tonight. A couple housekeeping things really quickly before I let you meet your candidates. One, in Minnesota we have this great thing called same-day voter registration. However,